When the pandemic first hit, we thought digital audio might dip because people weren't spending as much time commuting. And that wasn't the case. People continued to increase their time spent on digital audio. And it's being driven by the same things at home as it was in commuting or in pre-pandemic times, which is podcasts and music streaming.
Hey gang, it's Tuesday, June 22nd. Yuri and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX. I'm Marcus, and today I'm joined by Yuri Wurmser, one of our principal analysts covering technology.
Hey Marcus, how are you?
Hey chap, very well. Thanks for asking. No one asks. Terrible bunch we work with. No one asks. Thanks you so much for asking.
We're a rude group.
Only took 3 years. Today's fact, the first webcam was created to check on a coffee pot. Nowadays, people video chat with folks all over the world. However, webcam technology originated with a slightly less ambitious goal. In 1993, researchers at the Computer Science Department at the University of Cambridge, close to where I grew up, actually, just hated getting up from their chairs, I can relate, to check on the coffee pot, only to find out that it was empty. So they wired up a system that would stream images, 3 every minute, from the Trojan room where the coffee was being kept to the internal computer network. By the end of the year, the stream made it onto the new World Wide Web, and the Trojan room coffee pot briefly attained international fame. That's probably not true. It's genius though. I feel like I need to set them up everywhere so I never have to move.
I thought I had a coffee addiction, but that's really bad.
If there's nothing in there, I'm not moving an inch. Today's real topic, how the time we spend using our smartphones is changing. Yuri, we're talking about smartphones, how people are using them. Also, we'll talk a little bit about tablets a bit later on in the lead story. The first question, Yuri, has to be, what did the pandemic do to the amount of time people spend on their smartphones?
So as smartphones have been growing steadily for years and years and years in terms of time spent, the pandemic just supercharged that though. So in 2019, we estimate that the average US adult spent 2 hours and 34 minutes on their smartphones. In 2020, during the pandemic, that went up to 3 hours and 2 minutes. So a 28-minute increase in 2020. And we don't expect that to end going into 2021. We expect further increases this year and for the rest of our forecast.
And we're talking about everything you do on your phone being counted as time spent on your phone, except calling people.
That's right. Yeah. These are non-voice minutes on a smartphone.
Okay. So time spent on a smartphone jumped by nearly half an hour, 2019 to 2020, reaching pretty much 3 hours a day. We'll add another 8 minutes this year and another 8 minutes in 2022 as it approaches 3 hours and 20 minutes by the end of next year. Yuri, as you note, a third of all time spent with media this year is going to mobile, including smartphone and tablet. 4 hours and 20 minutes pretty much in terms of total time on mobile. That beats TV by over an hour, and time spent on computers would be behind TV by about 15 minutes. So mobile well out in front. What mobile activities benefited the most, Yuri? Another way of saying that, asking that would be, what are people doing more of on their smartphones?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that in a second, but I just want to point out one thing. The number you mentioned for mobile time spent could include time spent while they're watching TV. Doesn't necessarily mean instead of watching TV. They could be doing both at the same time. And
right.
We count that both as a TV minute and as a mobile minute, if that's the case.
Good point.
So in terms of the activities that really jumped heavily during the pandemic, it was social networks, social media skyrocketed. The app times rose from 40 minutes on average for US adults to 49 minutes, sort of a 9-minute jump, kind of a huge jump in time spent for that. Video also had a really big jump going from 31 minutes to 37 minutes. Games went up from 21 minutes to 25 minutes. Messaging from 16 to 19 minutes. So, I wouldn't say across the board rises in time spent among apps, but certainly there were wide swaths of categories that went up as a result of the pandemic. We were just spending more time on our phones and on our devices.
And which category do you think has the most, I say staying power, but which category do you think will grow the most in the next 12 months or so, as opposed to slowing down?
Yeah, so social networks kind of used up their 2-year supply of minutes last year. We're projecting essentially flat minutes, maybe 1 minute increase for social networks. But you're asking which jumped the most, and it's really will jump the most. It's going to be digital audio, which grew at a decent 5 minutes last year, but we expect it to grow another 5 minutes this year for the average US adult. In video, we expect to continue to grow again this year up to 39 minutes from 37 minutes. Some of the other categories like gaming and messaging will hold steady or maybe even dip a little bit, but that's from a really high base.
Yeah, let's talk about audio for a second, because for all the talk of mobile video and using social networks on your phone, time spent listening to audio on a mobile device, on an app, was the highest of the three categories. Again, in-app, 2019, audio minutes was the highest, according to our numbers, 43 minutes. This is amongst the population, these minutes spread across the population. So the average person, 45 minutes on audio, 40 minutes on social networks, 31 on video, and audio will gain the most minutes by 2023 over that 4-year span. Audio gains 16, social network gains 13, video gains 11. By 2023, people will listen to just over an hour a day of audio on a smartphone, over 50 minutes of social networking use, and over 40 minutes of video. Well, what's going on here? How is audio outperforming in-app on mobile across the population? How is it outperforming social networks and video in terms of minutes?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. And in fact, when the pandemic first hit, we thought digital audio might dip because people weren't spending as much time commuting. And that wasn't the case. People continued to increase their time spent on digital audio, and it's being driven by the same things at home as it was in commuting or in pre-pandemic times, which is podcasts and music streaming. Those are really the two growth drivers. I think the biggest portion is probably music streaming, but podcasts are growing rapidly and really are going to be a big source of those extra minutes. Have been for the last couple of years and will be for the coming years as well. And
a chance that social audio might also help bump that number up.
Yeah, I mean, it's still really early there. Yeah. We're talking about Clubhouse and some of the other features out there, but yeah, I mean, that has potential to drive numbers up as well. Still too early to tell. I think you can bet on podcasts growing. Some of these social audio platforms, I think they'll have staying power, but they could be a flash in the pan. We'll have to see.
Yeah. You note in your report 29%, nearly 3 in 10 minutes, 29% of mobile non-voice minutes will be spent in audio apps or sites this year, which is remarkable. Yuri, something else that jumps out to me in your report, something else I've spoken with a few other analysts about, because this trend kind of spans social networking as well as spanning mobile. TikTok became people's most used social network on an individual level in 2020. It's 39 minutes to Facebook's 35, to Twitter's 32, to Instagram's 29 minutes a day. 39 minutes a day people spending on TikTok as it overtakes Facebook for the first time. Your thoughts on this trend?
Yeah, I mean, it's anecdotally, we heard it all along that people were like, TikTok was exploding during the pandemic. As a way for people to engage with others. It was really engaging content. The numbers are per user. Facebook still has a broader user base. So overall minutes in the country Facebook is still leading. But yeah, in terms of engaging, TikTok is proving itself to be the most engaging of the platforms right now for its users. And it's addictive. You just sort of start going through these videos people are posting and you don't want to stop. And that's kind of what it's showing. It's just been an incredibly powerful platform during the pandemic, and it looks like it will continue to be going forward.
Yeah, it does indeed. According to our numbers, it's going to stay ahead of Facebook for the coming years. Actually, the rankings don't change too much at all. I think Snapchat starts to threaten Instagram a little bit, or I shouldn't say threaten. It actually comes kind of level pretty much with Instagram in terms of minutes. But yeah, TikTok seems like it's going to be sitting on top in terms of how many minutes does an individual spend using a social network. Yuri, 5 years ago, in 2016, half of Americans used a tablet. Today, half of Americans use a tablet. And in 4 years' time, half of Americans will use a tablet. How about the amount of time, though, that people spend using tablets? How has that changed, if at all?
It plateaued. People spend more and more time on their tablets until about, I think it was 2016 or 2017. And it has essentially stayed flat since then until the pandemic. And with the pandemic, we see that the average US adult spend an extra 4 minutes on their tablets. So, that means significantly more for the average tablet user, since only half of the adults use tablets. But we had a pretty significant bump in 2020, but we don't expect that to be sticky. So in 2021, that number will go down from 1 hour and 13 minutes per day, to 1 hour and 11 minutes. So tablets will lose 2 minutes a day per US adult. Still higher than it was before the pandemic. So it's been a little bit sticky to gains, but it hasn't changed the trajectory of tablet use significantly.
Its staying power, its resilience is surprisingly remarkable, because it's almost like TV ad spending. It was always $70 billion. It is today, and will forever apparently be $70 billion. There's a little up and down, but it's pretty much staying at that level. Tablet as well. Time spent on tablet. People just spending about an hour-ish, north or south of an hour on a tablet, have always, will always, it seems.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right in terms of the overall numbers, but if you sort of dig beneath those numbers, I think you're seeing some changes in the way people are using it. For one thing, our numbers are US adults, and I think you're seeing a lot more use in education and tablets among kids. So tablets themselves, I think, are doing pretty well. From a tablet manufacturing standpoint, I think they had a tremendous year last year, in part due to the needs of remote education. And even beyond that, I think people are just using it more for more industrial purposes and for more educational purposes, regardless of the pandemic.
Yeah, excellent points, because that's one of the issues with the tablet, is what people were like, what am I supposed to use this for? And now it's starting to find I'd say niches, but these can be pretty huge niches, but basically it's use cases. Final question for the lead story, Yuri. Phoenix Suns. Phoenix Suns have been, no one expected them to win anything this year. When they came into the playoffs, LeBron James, who they faced in the first round, had more playoff game experience than the entire team combined. They're too young, everyone says. However, they annihilated my Lakers, and then swept the current NBA MVP, Nikola Jokic's Nuggets. Despite being the second seed in the West, they've surprised many and have become somewhat of a dark horse. So I'm saying all this to basically explain what I mean by dark horse. Everyone probably already knew that, but I love talking about basketball, so I snuck it in. Yuri, what app category has been a bit of a dark horse in the past 12 months?
That's a really good question. I would say that, we don't even split out mobile shopping. So mobile shopping has, I don't think it'll surprise anyone. All evidence we have is that mobile shopping apps had a huge bump in terms of downloads and time spent. People aren't spending a ton of time on each mobile shopping app, but that's certainly been a huge percentage increase for them. Again, we don't project those numbers, but I can tell you that there's been a jump there. Another kind of surprising place that has held up pretty well in terms of time spent have been dating apps. You would think that people would not spend time on their dating apps since they couldn't go out on dates, but people are using it as almost like a social network to meet people remotely and to interact with them. So that was one of those areas that was kind of surprising. And lastly was fitness. Again, not a huge surprise, given people were stuck at home and couldn't go out to gyms, but there was a big jump in the amount of downloads of fitness apps.
Interesting. Well, that is it for the first half of the show. Time now for the halftime report, where we summarize the key takeaways from a lead story in 30 seconds or less. Yuri, your key takeaways from the first half on how folks' smartphone time spent is changing.
Yeah, so huge jump during the pandemic. Those numbers, that additional time spent is going to be sticky because people just got used to using their smartphones for things they hadn't used before, like mobile ordering, spending more time on TikTok. They just found a bunch of ways that they liked using their smartphones, and we expect that to continue to grow going into the future.
Well, that's all we've got time for the lead story. It's time now for In Other News. But before that, we're going to say goodbye to Yuri. Thank you so much, Yuri, for joining us for the first half of the show.
Yeah, great being here.
Now, time for In Other News. A first quick word from our sponsor, VTEX. Retail's next competitive threat may come from a business model or channel that didn't even exist a few months ago. This modern dynamic requires companies to adapt quickly, pivoting business seemingly overnight, something traditional commerce platforms just can't support. There's a new enterprise commerce platform on the rise, one that's fast, flexible, and doesn't require 9 months and $1 million to get up and running. Go to vtex.com/emarketer to learn more. Right, folks, we are back. It's time now for In Other News. Joining us today for the second half of the show is Daniel Keys. He is one of our analysts on the payments and commerce team.
Hey, Marcus.
Hey, chap. Thanks for joining us. Today, in Other News, how a product's first online review can have a lasting impact, people returning more things, and to be like Amazon or not to be like Amazon. Story 1. A new study published in Marketing Science finds a product's first online review has a lasting impact, affecting how many reviews it receives and its star rating, writes Lisa Ward of the Wall Street Journal. A negative first review received 15 fewer reviews overall after 6 months and dragged down the product's average rating by 0.3 stars over a year. Daniel, your thoughts on this phenomenon?
I mean, it's a real issue for marketplaces and places where you want your products to have a positive review and you get stuck. You know, a pretty easy fix is to either hold reviews until you have 5 or 10 or get reviews in advance. That way you avoid this issue. Otherwise, you kind of get mentally anchored into, oh, this product has a negative review. I don't want to have it or I don't want to review it. It's just not, or I think it's bad because you saw it was bad. So having, 5, 10, 15 reviews up front can maybe solve this problem for a lot of merchants.
So what you're saying is by having them up front, you mean wait until there's at least, let's say 5,
Sure.
And then they can go public. Then they can appear on the site and people can get a gauge of how good or bad the product is based on the aggregate of these 5.
Exactly. If all 5 reviews are bad, it's a bad product and that's fine. But that way, they're more representative and hopefully not getting held on by one bad review.
Exactly. Story 2. One byproduct of the online shopping boom that we just witnessed over the past 15 months is that people return more things. Online returns spiked 70%, 70 in 2020, suggests customer experience platform Narvar. A mid-May Wall Street Journal article notes that online clothing purchases are the most returned product. 45% of US consumers have returned clothes in the last year, being sent back at double the rate of electronics, the category with the second highest return rate, according to CoreSite research. Daniel, how can retailers get returns under control?
There's a few things they can do. They can have the most detailed sizing charts available on their websites. It's very simple. They can invest in technologies like augmented reality that can allow you to kind of test out how things might look or might fit before you buy them. That's increasingly available. It's not available for all products yet. And even returns are going to happen for a product, especially apparel. It's a cost of doing business online for apparel. But if they can kind of limit the cost on the returns, whether that's accepting returns at their stores or partnering with PayPal recently bought Happy Returns, so you could partner with PayPal, not just Happy Returns, but they have locations where you can return it to, potentially trimming the price that you're paying for every return. Just finding ways to make them less costly is another option because there are always going to be returns when you buy products online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the online return rate for clothes can be 3 times higher than apparel bought in store, noted that Wall Street Journal article from mid-May. Free return shipping has made it very expensive for retailers. Navit Basin, chief executive of return software company Newmine, says that for a typical chain, every $1 million reduction in returns can translate into $500,000 added to the bottom line. It's a big deal. Story 3, to be like Amazon or not to be like Amazon? That is the question. To be more like Amazon, brands Express, Urban Outfitters, and J.Crew are opening up to third-party sellers to draw shoppers to their sites and away from Amazon's marketplace, notes Charity L. Scott of the Wall Street Journal. To not be like Amazon, companies like New York-based Shop In NYC pulls inventories from local businesses to create a local version of the Everything Store that Amazon is known for, positioning themselves as the anti-Amazon, writes Dana Mattioli, also of the Journal. Daniel, what do you make of these 2 distinct strategies?
I think they're both pretty strong, and I think ultimately you can even have it both ways, because to not be Amazon, you really just actually not be Amazon. It's okay to act a little bit like Amazon and have a marketplace because you're still not Amazon. Just because you do have a similar practice, you're not as scary, you're not maybe not the same practices. And with the Express and Urban Outfitters concept, that way you're getting more products on your website. You're bringing more consumers to your website to look for products, not just your own. But ideally, they'll also buy one of yours while you're there, which is something that Amazon has benefited from as well. But you're not Amazon. That's not so bad. And then as far as the Amazon reputation angle goes, by being a explicitly anti-Amazon platform, you win over people who really don't want to shop with Amazon. So I think both work, and you can even have it both ways if you want to, as long as you're not Amazon, in which case you can't have it both ways.
That is all we've got time for. Thank you so much to Daniel for joining us for the second half.
Happy to pinch it.
Thank you so much to Yuri for joining us for the first half. Thank you to Victoria, who edits the entire show. Thank you to everyone listening. Nicole Perrin will see you tomorrow for the Behind the Numbers ad platform, the New Marketer podcast made possible by VTEX, where she'll be speaking with Tony Marlowe at Integral Ad Science.